So, let's call the meeting of the Equestrian Preserve Committee meeting to order. We have Carlos is with us in person. Rachel Eidelman will be here at 7. Christy is on the way, so we'll have 4 in person shortly. And we have Annabelle Garrett and Glenn Fleischer on the phone. So
we're just missing one.
Just missing one. So let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So tonight is a workshop meeting. Our only topic is, and it's a big one, is livestock waste, which is a big issue for Wellington and a big issue for Palm Beach County, and it's a continual challenge, and nobody's got all the answers yet, but we are going to get more educated tonight and talk about some potential solutions, and it's primarily going to be a presentation from Mike O'Dell, who not only is the expert in Wellington, but is the expert in Palm Beach County, and I'm going to say South Florida. I think you are the expert on livestock waste removal. So we're lucky to have you. Thank you very much. Before we get started, any questions? I know, Carlos, you worked on this some between our meetings, and we all work on it in between meetings, but let's get started with the presentation. And then at some point, as we get either through the meeting or towards the end of the meeting, we can talk about some of the ongoing potential solutions out there.
Okay, thank you. Ryan and I are going to tag team with you tonight and walk you through what we've been working on. We just recently had our 6th annual livestock waste haulers meeting that we've been doing each year in the latter part of August, first part of September. We try to do something with the livestock haulers before the season starts. So we just had that meeting, so the timing of this is pretty well. So I'm going to let Ryan go ahead and kick us off with the presentation, and we'll, as we go through this, we'll give you a little more background on some of the things that we've been working on, but we'll kind of talk it through. So it's an open meeting, and we'll take your questions and comments as we move through it as well.
Okay, so the major topics we want to cover tonight are what are the issues with manure disposal, where does it go, how much manure is there, and what are the methods. So first of all, what are the issues? We have the food safety issues, which is one of the primary concerns. Safety and health are always going to be major concerns, so that's a big topic we need to consider.
And is that relates to the agricultural land to our west?
Right. We have surrounded by agricultural lands to the west, and that sort of relates to environmental preservation with the Everglades also. We have the waste volume, the number of horses in Wellington, and also in Palm Beach County, in the region, a large number of horses, so generating a lot of manure. And then the preservation of the industry, and some type of long-term disposal plan is needed. Right now, where's the waste going? It's going to the farmlands as soil amendment, and to the Solid Waste Authority where it's being burned. Those are 2 of the largest takers of manure right now. It's also used as a soil additive. And then there's the illegal dumping, which runs a whole spectrum. You have the dumpers who might be going at night without people knowing, and then you have on the other end you have where it's being added in the fields, and maybe it's not permitted. It's still illegal dumping, even if the farmland could take the waste, the amount of waste. But if it's not being permitted, it's still illegal.
There needs to be a nutrient management plan put together for any kind of farm operations. And Palm Beach County also has their disposal code, which you can take. I think it's up to 10 cubic yards. You can go on your, for composting purposes for your backyard uses in a gardening kind of operation. Those are illegal. Those are legal uses, but illegal uses, if it's not permitted and you're using it, like for some of the things we've talked about, there are farm operations that are using it for amendments and things like that. If they don't have a nutrient management plan, then that's the other end of the spectrum where it's still an illegal process. We need to have all of the disposal going to legal facilities that are permitted and licensed to take on livestock waste.
Do you have a feel for what percentage of it is legal versus illegal at the moment?
Well, I think one of the things that we've been talking about, one of our permit requirements is that we get load tickets from the haulers on an annual basis, or a quarterly basis, I'm sorry. That's slowly been surely been pulling together. Ryan pulled some numbers together for us for the previous year. I think we had close to 85,000 tons of waste. We'll show you some numbers a little bit earlier, but if you do the math, it comes out to be pretty close to, about 9,000 or 10,000 horses. So, we're seeing, at least from Wellington's point of view, that we're coming.
It's Annabelle.
Yes.
Can I ask a quick question about
Sure.
the illegal part of it? Because so as far as I understand, and please correct me, I'm trying to understand, but please correct me where I go wrong here. Every property that has a manure bin needs to get it inspected annually. And part of that inspection, if I am going through the process correctly, it also involves giving the name of your hauler, and there are only so many approved haulers. I think there are only 2 in Wellington, maybe 3. And so can you just touch on how, where the loopholes that people are getting around are? Is it more, do you know what I mean?
Well, there are 12 haulers licensed, or there were 12 haulers last year licensed.
12.
We expect to see the same 12, if not 1 or 2 more. So, so that's where we are right now. The loophole, one of the loopholes that I was referencing to, is the fact that a farm owner, and I'm not talking about a horse, I'm talking about an agricultural person who says, hey,
okay,
I can take 50 loads of waste, or I want to amend my soil on my property. So because it's an agricultural product, there is the assumption that, well, because it's agricultural and I'm using it for agricultural purposes, I'm fine. But there is a nutrient management plan that needs to be provided to that farm owner by FDEP. And there's a process, because what is going on is there's an agronomics number that talks about what your soils can uptake and what the vegetable or farm product that you're producing, what it will uptake as far as nutrients go. And so you can't apply anything more than what the agricultural the unit numbers are for that product, that combined of soil and product mix that you're trying to grow. And so that's how they come up with these numbers for the amount of waste to be dumped on, livestock waste to be dumped on a specific property, or to be utilized on a specific property. So without knowing, many of the farm owners just think that, we'll just dump it here. And what we've found over the years is that, and we've had a number of cases where people pile it, 4 and 5 and 6 feet deep on their property, thinking that, well, they've now disposed of it, when in fact they haven't done anything except create an illegal dump pile. And that's what's been going on.
It's all the urine that's in there that gets mixed in too.
Right. So, like I said, it's been an educational process, and that's why
How many acres of land are we talking about within Wellington that are quote unquote illegal?
We have, in the village of Wellington, we have at this point we have no properties that I'm aware of that are approved for disposal.
Oh, excellent.
Mike, this is Rachel. Do they have any ways to make biofuels out of the manure? at this time?
We will, we'll continue into that discussion as we move forward through this presentation, but yes, but we can also, if we can just move on with our discussion, we'll get back to that.
Okay.
All right?
Are you guys fielding questions from us, or is it? Okay, sorry.
So can we move on? Okay,
Okay,
sorry.
thanks.
Go ahead.
So we just recently, last month, we finished the stall counts for 2018. Right now, we have an estimated 900 barns with 10,212 stalls on 652 parcels. And if you look at the pie chart there, you can see approximately 18% have 1 to 5 stalls. Those are the smaller farms, and approximately 19 are the large farms with over 20 stalls. So those types of, those sizes of barns, of farms may have, might be economically feasible to look at some on-site disposal methods.
So we're presenting you with some facts and figures that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation, but the point of this is to start thinking about the idea of how do we deal with the volume of waste that's being generated. And this conversation doesn't just stick here to the Village of Wellington. It's something that we need to look at countywide. So we thought we would try to explore some other options, and so we're setting up some information for you to think about as we get towards the end of this presentation.
Right, and this is just a map, a visual of the stall sizes per parcel. The light blue would be the smaller farms, and the magenta is sort of the medium size, 6 to 20 stalls, and then the dark blue are the larger farms.
Over 20 stalls.
20 stalls, right.
So you can see the dominant barn size in the village is over between 6 to 20 is the vast majority of the types of facilities we have constructed here in the village.
Can you leave that slide up a minute? You seen it enough?
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
You were waiting for me to...
No, it was Jane had asked to
Yeah,
leave
I
it up.
stopped it. It's worth looking at.
Okay.
And then just going back to the numbers again, you can see the stall counts starting in 2012 have increased about 400 or 500 stalls every 2 years. So it's been a gradual increase.
So that kind of gives you an idea of the construction activities that have been going on in the village since we initially started this, which was back in 2012.
Mike, looking at this with a 500 stalls increment, we really have to think of what I was talking before the meeting, a place in Wellington to take this and do it like the human disposal that we have in Pearson, do a horse manure and treatment plant, and it's getting worse every year. It's not getting better.
Right.
And do you have another page with Palm Beach County?
We don't.
No, because we don't, at this point, we have no way of estimating, and that's one of the recommendations that we have, is that we don't have any way of estimating the number of stalls or horses in that matter for countywide. and Ryan, we can get into some of those discussions, but the village, when we started this back in 2012, we explored probably 3 different methodologies for determining the number of stalls in the village. One of them was to look at just the area of the barns. In other words, we can use through our GIS mapping systems, we can just take an aerial photograph and look at the barn areas and just calculate that overall square footage. And we were taking a percentage of that square footage and saying, well, that's the amount of space dedicated to the housing of an animal, and we were using the annual, the average 12 by 12 stall, so the 4,400 square feet, and dividing it out and doing the mathematics. We found we were way overestimating the number of horses, because what we found, and this may be unique to Wellington, and you all can help us a little bit with this, but as we look beyond Wellington's borders and we get out into Palm Beach County, we may find that the types of barns being constructed here in the village are not indicative of those that are being constructed outside the village, because we have dressage riders and polo people, and those are kind of the extremes. We found that the percentage of actual space being dedicated to the housing of animals depend on the type of discipline. So polo people, polo facilities, 50 to 60, maybe even 70% of the barn, maybe even higher in some cases, of the barn area is being dedicated to the housing of an animal. Whereas you get into the hunter jumpers and the dressage, some of them are as low as 20%. So we were not, that didn't dawn on us until we started to actually look at, wow, look at the square footage of the barn area and look at what's being dedicated to the horse, actual housing of the horse now. I mean, because what you found is that you found the grooming stall and the wash stall and all kinds of different things that are going on. And so the different disciplines also dictate the type of barn and the amount of space being dedicated. So to say, well, we've got X number of thousands of square feet of barn area out there, and we'll just take X percentage of that, didn't work for us at all. And maybe, maybe we would know better if we start looking at the county. Maybe there's a more uniform activity to that, but we didn't find that here in the village. So we tried that methodology. We tried to take areas of the village which we knew were dedicated more towards polo versus hunter jumpers, and we started to take those areas and say, well, let's take this number now. But that didn't work out either, because there's such a mix in that. So we ended up, and because of our village is relatively small, and what we ended up having to do is actually go through the permits and look at the permits and determine the number of stalls actually permitted on each property. It was a very tedious process.
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
It took us, as a staff, it took 4 people dedicated 3 months to do that.
How about that?
So
Thank you very much.
And that's how we started this process. So that was in 2012.
So, but we have no information for Palm Beach County beyond Wellington.
No, and I think that's one of the challenges that we're looking at right now. Is I've been working with Palm Beach County and the planning and zoning staff over there, trying to come up with a methodology to employ, and quite frankly, that methodology that I explained to you came back to us as well in an email saying, oh, I think we got this great idea. And I said, well, here's what happened in Wellington when we did that.
Right.
And we way overestimated it. And I think that's something that, but maybe we can look at it, but maybe as a committee you might understand the equestrian industry outside of Wellington, and maybe there are more uniform barn construction activities happening elsewhere that we can say, well, this is pretty much the barn operation, and we can be a little bit more specific about it, but it didn't work for the village.
I've always wondered if we couldn't get the data from the feed companies. I know there's a lot of feed stores and a lot of feed suppliers, but
you got the feed companies, you got the horseshoers. They go to the barn, to those barns, even the manure haulers.
Well, that's what we've been, one of the things we've been trying to do since we started this in 2012. This is exactly one of those connecting the dots scenarios we were trying to do, is to gather this information annually, or quarterly from the manure haulers. So we know without too much criticism of the numbers. 50 pounds a day comes out of every horse. You know, we can do the math. It's pretty easy. We can also, from the haulers' information, we've also gathered that we're processing a lot more stall waste material as well, the bedding material, just because there's a lot of turnover during the show periods here. So we can add a percentage to that. But I think the main component to all this is that, you know, we can dial in a fairly decent number if we had a good quantity from them. And I think, you know, I think we're beginning to put those things in place and be able to start connecting those dots. That's really important. And I think one of the other things that we've been talking to the haulers about for some time is weight. Right now they're bulk hauling. It's just so many per load they're getting to empty manure bin. If we could start transitioning over to a tonnage basis, then we could actually weigh their trucks and have an actual weight that they're hauling. And that way we can also have a better number to work with. Because right now, all we're getting are loads. And so that's a cubic yard. And we have, based on their information that they provided to us over the last 4 or 5 years, we have kind of zeroed in on that 600 pounds per cubic yard number here. You can read different things. You'll find it at 650. You'll find it at 6, you know, somewhere between 5. The number kind of varies, but we've kind of honed in on that 600 pounds per cubic yard is what we've been utilizing as a way of converting that. So 6 to 650, and it'll vary in the winters that we've had. You know, they'll tell you they're hauling a lot more water, so it's obviously a lot heavier. So go ahead.
Okay, so this slide sort of speaks to what we've been talking about. We have an estimate, or a rough guess, that horses outside of Wellington are close to the same as in Wellington. But it's a guess. Right now we don't have. We want to work on getting better numbers.
Yeah,
outside the village.
Let's use that number. If we have 10,000 horses, there are 10,000 outside,
right.
And we go from there, because
Right.
there's no way to determine how many horses are outside if we don't have any control.
Right. So this is the assumption that we've made.
Right. The assumption we feel good about the Wellington number of stalls, permanent and temporary stalls, at 13,500, and estimating around another 15,000 outside of Wellington. So in season, 28,500 horses. Off season, 14,000 horses, for a total, if at 50 pounds per horse per day, comes out to 386 million tons per
Pounds.
Hey, Ryan,
Pounds.
we are controlling the waste product coming out of Wellington. Is there any control on the waste product outside of Wellington? Where is that going?
Well, the town of Loxahatchee Groves has their ordinance that says that there's no waste that can go inside of their community. They can only you can only haul waste from its inside of it out, or within Loxahatchee Groves. So there's nothing should be going into Loxahatchee Groves from this area anyway. We don't we don't have really any concrete numbers that's beyond Loxahatchee Groves or anywhere in the acreage, or Jupiter Farms, or we can go
Fences or
right. We can start
rail, nothing like that.
all that. Some of the larger farms, if you go down to the Delray Training Facility or the harness facility down, that's pretty easy. There's the managers down there will tell you instantly, well, they have X number of stalls on the property. That's pretty simple. So the larger properties is not really our issue. I think what we looked at from establishing this number from a county-wide perspective is that we probably could do a pretty good job of honing in on that number by talking to the large operators, because they will know exactly what they've got on their property. So the individual farms that we have, like in Loxahatchee Groves, and Jupiter Farms and elsewhere around the county, we would probably have to start looking at some kind of horse per acre scenario, or look at the barn structures, or look at something to give us an idea of what we were looking at, to hone in on that number. So let's assume for a minute that, let's say we talk to the large farm operators, large horse operators outside of the village of Wellington, and that gets us a number that we feel comfortable with, about 50% of that. So we feel comfortable that that number is right. Now we've got the remaining 50% of just horse operators that are out there with their operators, you know, their farm operations. How do we zero in on that number? And I think that's one of the things we're going to focus on.
Are we responsible for that, or are you trying to help Palm Beach County?
Help Palm Beach County. Yeah, this is
We
a.
got enough trouble of our.
Yeah, I know that.
So
Yeah.
where are we going to put the money
Right.
from?
Right. So we can keep going because we'll bring you back to that as well.
And is there an entity or a department or organization somewhere in the county that's working on this as well?
Right now, just been working with Palm Beach County Planning and Zoning. I'll give my kudos to Lisa O'Mara because she's been doing a lot of work with me on this, and we're trying to figure out how to work with the Palm Beach County Property Appraiser's Office. How can we work with their building department? Who can we work with in their agencies to try to hone in on numbers? So
Okay.
we've been trying to do that. Yes.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
Okay, so just to recap, around 386 million pounds a year is our estimate right now, and that equates to 193,000 tons.
And this is Wellington or Wellington and the
That's-
county?
This would be county.
Okay.
If we're going to talk about Wellington and then we talk about the total number of horses as being, again, as we've shown you here, about 28,500 horses in Palm Beach County, that would be our guesstimate. We know about half of that is in Wellington.
So some of the disposal methods that we've heard about or seen, we talked about soil amendments earlier. There's composting, uses fertilizer, recycle the shavings, processing for fuel, gasification and biochar, and what other technologies could we be looking at that would be feasible for Wellington?
And these are all operations that, obviously the soil amendment process, that's actively being utilized right here in Palm Beach County today. The composting and recycling, composting is happening in certain locations to a fertilizer. The recycling of shavings, there are some entities out there that have, that are trying to get that operation up and running. I don't think we have anybody specifically doing that today, but I know that there are some the New Horizons 880 LLC operation, which is trying to get up and running. That's one of their processes. Processing for fuel, there's the pelletization process where it gets dried, compacted, and then pelletized, and then it's just burned. That's a methodology that's being used.
Is that being used here?
No, but it's used for heat, and I know it's like in the Northeast for some of the they have the pelletizing stoves that they burn the pellets in for heating your home, and I know that over in Europe it's another big market over there as well. Gasification, that's a process where conversion of the waste into a natural gas product. We can run our fleet off of that. We are converting our fleet. The Village of Wellington has been converting its fleet to run off of natural gas. So if we could produce natural gas through this process, then we could augment that in our fleet operations. Biochar is another operation where this process, although I think it's something we can consider, the process itself is kind of an industrial type process, and it involves some uses of other chemicals. There's byproducts that come off of that. I've been told that there's a big lucrative market for this, that the power plants and operations like the people who produce cement, you can use this because it burns so much hotter than coal, and so it's a much more desirable product. It's a matter of producing that, and the cost of setting up a biochar facility and getting it up and running is very expensive. And this is why we go back to the idea of why are we talking about quantification? Why do we care how much waste we're producing. It's because if you want these types of facilities to come into Palm Beach County, they have to know the volume of waste they're dealing with. These are millions of dollars going into these operations. So this is a very tough market if you don't know what your supply is. If you look elsewhere in the country, where you have pig, farm, chicken operations, cattle operations, there is a 24/7 fuel supply coming in. They can quantify that because they know the number of head of cattle they've got, or the number of chickens they've got. They know the pig farming. All of that is a given quantity to those operations, and so those operations set up and know what they're going to be getting for a fuel supply on an annual basis. The up and down movement in Palm Beach County here with the equine industry is something that's why the quantification is really, really important, because seasonally we can give you an idea, but when it turns to off season, we're guessing. Even in the village, I'm guessing at the number of horses that are here during the off season. We know it's growing, but we don't know the numbers.
Mike, what is the process of soil amendment?
The soil amendment.
Let's say that we want to do the soil amendment, because remember that our production is seasonal. So you cannot have a gasification or a bio-charcoal or, 4 months of the year working, and then the other 8 months,
right,
you don't have the production. But the soil amendment, we can.
So the soil amendment process that's being utilized currently right now is some of the fields are being taken out of production for months at a time. I'm being told somewhere between 7 and 8 months. The fields are being taken out of production. So.
And which fields are these?
Primarily sugarcane.
Sugar.
Okay, so sugarcane fields are taken out of production for that period of time. The waste is being spread and then tilled into the soil, and then it's left fallow for a number of months so it composts essentially in the ground. So again, here's quantification again. Why do we want to know how much we're producing? Because a farmer who takes fields out of production is lost money. So U.S. Sugar and others who have been taking our waste that put that in their fields, they don't want to take too much out of production, but they have a nutrient management plan that tells them how much they can spread within their fields. So they're trying to balance what we're going to give them as far as waste material goes from our haulers to their farm operations. And it's really important that they don't take too much out of production, otherwise we're going to be if they're going to be losing money. If they don't put enough into production, then we're going to have a pile of horse waste somewhere being piled up somewhere else. So we're trying to make sure that we get that balance created as well.
And then don't we have the issue of the Right to Farm Act and not being able to mandate where the livestock waste goes?
Yeah, as far as livestock waste, there's no way to franchise that. I mean, if we had done that, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this today, because obviously we would have done that years ago. But it's an agricultural product, and there's no way to tell a hauler or a farm owner you must go from here to there with it. It's simply open to the marketplace, which is why the hauler is such an important part of this whole equation. We don't have anyone who's coming in as a third party operator to say, oh, I've got the disposal method and I've got the trucks to pick it up and haul it with, and here's what we're going to do with it. We haven't run into that person yet. So
Some of the things we've been working on to help with the disposal is the BMPs. We have the most recent BMP ordinance for livestock waste was ordinance 2012-12.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? That's a Florida Best Management Practices Partnership, correct?
That is Wellington's ordinance.
Isn't there
There is
partnership with
an
the state?
FDACS ordinance, and we have partnered with FDACS. And they have their own BMPs, though.
in FDACS's program, any of the farm owners are welcome to enroll in that program if they would like. The village is helping with the operation of that program as well. It's just another best management practices. It's really geared towards our water quality and meeting our water quality needs.
So do the best management practices of Wellington mirror the best management practices of the state, or are they similar enough?
Yes, I've done an A/B comparison of the two, and we are very similar. I will give, the only thing I will give kudos to FDACS, and because they are a farming operation, they're much more farm-friendly. They can help you with your farm operations. They can talk to you about how fertilization is going for your pastures. They can help you with farm activities. Obviously, we are not farmers, so I can't counsel you on your operations, but FDACS is fully vetted in doing all of that, and I would welcome people to, to utilize their facilities.
We've replumbed the drainage system in Wellington. Mike, will you go into more detail?
Yeah,
on
with the adoption of our settlement agreement with South Florida Water Management District and the Army Corps of Engineers, we have we engage in a process where we basically have taken all the water from Basin B, and then for those of you who are trying to figure out what is Basin B, it's basically everything south of Pearson Road. We reverse that flow, and we now flow everything from there going north now up to the C51 canal. We have a series of pump stations all along the C51 canal that we pump our water out of. So I think in Basin B now, I think we have one pump station number 8, which is at the corner of Pearson and Owsley Farms Road, at the very western end. And we pull water from there, and we pull it and push it up to and out through the C51 canal. That water now flows westward to the stormwater treatment area located on our western perimeter. It's 10 square miles. That water then is pumped into that stormwater treatment area by the South Florida Water Management District and Army Corps of Engineers, and it flows through a series of cells where the nutrients are removed. And then it finally ends up back at the south end where it flows out into the water conservation area. So it's been a complete replumbing of all of the things that we do. So then there's
Is the C51 the one that runs along
Southern Boulevard, correct? That's the Palm Beach County Canal, West Palm Beach Canal. And then Palm Beach County, we've been working with them. As I mentioned, they have their own manure regulations where they've worked out some methodologies for the backyard farmer or gardener to take on some of the waste as well. And then we've been working with our governmental partners to work with them to get them to understand how important this industry is to us, Palm Beach County, and get them to help us not only with the enforcement of the rules and regulations, but also to look at how we can partner with them to get some disposal methodologies, which is evidenced by the things we're doing with Palm Beach County. And FDACS this year, like I said, we've partnered with them in an MOU for them to come in and help us with our best management practices for our farm operations. And this year, in Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department, we've been working with them through our CMV officers and our the Environmental Crimes Unit for illegal dumping. I would also like to give a shout out to Palm Beach County and their code enforcement, because they've been helping us tremendously with the illegal dumping operations. They've been very active whenever we find a complaint or we get a complaint, and it's not in our jurisdiction, which most of it is not. They've been very active in helping us pursue that. And then this year we have a new partner in the Fish and Wildlife. I got introduced to the captain, and it turns out that Fish and Wildlife has been given the enforcement portion of the regulations from FDACS. I'm sorry, from FDEP. Sorry, my mistake. So we were introduced to them as well. Go ahead.
I think you said that we pump the water to a 10 square mile levee area, and then from there it goes out to South Florida Water Management?
Goes when we have a map of I think we have a map that shows it doesn't do a very good job. Yeah, I guess it does.
But
This is the area we're talking
there's where we pump the water.
about. Right. So all of our water flows north
Uh-huh.
to the C51,
Yeah.
and then flows west to the stormwater treatment area, and then it's pumped down through these cells, and it comes out down at the south end down here. And then it goes out into the conservation area.
That's
Okay.
the edge on the other
Back-
side of Flying Cow.
Yes.
Back 10 years ago, when all this started, we were pumping out directly out of the Section 34 out to the Everglades and
Yes.
that. We flew over to see if the vegetation right out there in front of the pump station is different than a mile away, and you couldn't tell. If we fly over that 10 square mile area, are we gonna see a different vegetation than in the other side?
Well, each of the cells that the stormwater treatment area makes up, what you'll see is the cells along the very northern boundary, which would be along the C-51 canal, will have a different type of vegetation. To be honest with you, the best plant material that they've found so far to take up phosphorus and nutrients is the cattail. So you'll see a lot of cattails up in the northern portion of those cells, and as you move further south, you'll start to see the native vegetation become stronger. And so as it gets down to the very last pump station or last cell before it goes on to the pump station, most likely what you'll see are smaller plant materials that are more native in nature. So you will see that's something that South Florida and the Army Corps have been fine-tuning for a number of years. But I've been out to a number of them, and what you see are very heavily concentration of the intake areas or where the cattails are located. That's the best plant for nutrient uptake.
And so that's Wellington water. Where does the other Palm Beach County water go that's coming from the horse areas?
Well, you have Loxahatchee Groves and the acreage are all discharging into the C-51 as well. So it's not just Wellington water. It's Royal Palm Beach. I'm pretty sure all of you know this, but the divide is right there where the Lowe's shopping center is. You'll see in the C-51 canal, you'll see a water control structure there. That structure diverts the water east and west. They can open it up during a storm event and let the water flow out to tide if they want to, or they can keep it closed and move the water back westward, which is what they're doing right now. So all the areas that drain into that would be Royal Palm Beach, Wellington, Loxahatchee, the acreage. All of that goes into C-51. I heard someone.
Can you give me a little better description of where that area is that you're draining into? I know where the C-51 canal is, but
it's along our western boundary. It's on the west side of Flying Cow Road, and it borders the L40 canals to the west of that, and then the water conservation area is to the west of that. So it's bordered by the L40 canal on the western boundary, Flying Cow Road on the east, Southern Boulevard on the north, and then it tapers down to it turns out to be at our very southern boundaries.
Where is it in relation to that Wellington reclamation area out there?
Just to the west of that.
Just to the west of it,
right.
Okay.
Is that Glenn? Glenn, is that you?
Oh, that's Bob.
That sounds like Bob.
Bob Bush.
Who is it?
Bob Bushy.
Okay, Bob, if you take southern west, the entrance to Lion Country Safari, that's Fox Trail, and
Deer Run.
it will be to the south of that, and then there's that new development, 640 acres, they're building new homes. It will be south of that, and then you got that JKK pit where they sell sand. It will be south of that.
I know where. I'm pretty sure I know where it is now. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So looking at some possible solutions, first we need to get a better number on the quantification, not just in Wellington, but regionally, to help with the end users. So the end users will have an idea of how much waste they can use. Identifying processing properties as they would be the industrial lands, which we were just looking at on the map. You see them in purple. There aren't a lot around Wellington. There are a few.
And talk more about that, because I believe it's the processing can only happen on industrially zoned land. Is that right?
Well, what's transpired is about 2 years ago, if you'll remember, you heard the discussions of the Horizons 880 LLC operation, which was slated to go just off of State Road 880. It was on a 30-acre parcel. It was already zoned for a composting operation. What they had proposed to do was continue the composting operation, but they added to it a process where they brought the livestock waste in, separated the waste from the shavings, washed the shavings, repackaged the shavings, and then recycled them essentially. That process had gone through a whole series of county approvals. In fact, it was even slated for a county commission hearing for actual approval of the site when the vegetable farmers opposed the project. After a series of very long discussions and some other debates that had gone on, the county commission rescinded their approvals. They rescinded the ordinance they allowed for about 3 to 4 others to occur within the agricultural area, and they put a moratorium on any processing facilities out in the agricultural areas altogether. That 1-year moratorium is now passed, and staff has been working on another amendment to allow for livestock waste processing to occur, but now that process will only occur within industrially zoned lands, which is why this map is before you, because you can see anything that's in purple is industrially zoned. So what we found out, which we did not know, is that the vegetable farmers are subject to some requirements that are placed on by a third-party buyer. That third-party buyer has a lot of power, which we did not understand, unfortunately. I think we all learned a lot, but there was some misinformation being sent out that, well, if it was within a mile of a vegetable farm or whatever, but it turns out that really doesn't matter. The third-party buyer is like from Taco Bell or Target or Walmart or wherever. And if they decide that there's a possibility of some form of contamination to that vegetable field, they do not have to buy it. In fact, they will reject it. So that's huge to this industry. I mean, for Palm Beach County, agricultural industry is huge for us, and it's a multi-million-dollar a year industry for us. So we're not about to jeopardize that in any way, shape, or form. So taking a year off to take a look at what we can do and where we can go with it has led us back down to the industrial sites that you see along the Turnpike and along the I-95 corridor. And you can see many of them are well north of here. We have a few that are up along the Southern Boulevard corridor and the Turnpike, which is where we had assumed that we can probably go there. Now, the next issue that we're dealing with on these industrial parks is that they're individually owned. And so some of these individuals who own these parks do not want to see a manure processing facility inside their park. So that's going to be another challenge. And the other thing that the county's been looking at is where to put a facility like this. So Mayor McKinley announced that at our haulers meeting that they were working with Horizons 880 LLC to look at a piece of property that was on, I think it was off of Pike Road. Now it's an industrial area just by the Turnpike. It's something that the Solid Waste Authority owns. It's a 5 to 6 acre tract. It was an old landfill site. There's another 10 or 15 acres that's available, but not for building purposes. It's still under landfill, but it could be used for stockpiling or holding material. So these are the limitations that we're up against. And then everything that you see sort of in yellow around it is all residential. So you can kind of get a flavor for the idea that no matter where we go with this, we're going to hear not in my backyard. Just like what we hear here in Wellington. It's the same thing. So the challenge becomes, where do we put this stuff, and how do we appease all of the folks that are involved in it? There even was the objection. You can see out in the Glades area, you see a big chunk of purple that's out there. But we have to drive through the ag area with the material in order to get to that. And there was even some comments by the vegetable farmers that said, no, not even if you're driving through, because you got airborne bacteria and things like that. No, we don't want that happening either. So, you know, there's still some challenges that we're working on to make some things happen. So, yeah, this has been a bit of a challenge for us all.
So just going back to some of the solutions we were looking at is identifying some on-farm disposal technologies could help, maybe on smaller farms with only a few horses, or on some of the larger properties where they have room for something larger, a different type of disposal technology, where it would be economically feasible. And then we need to come up with some type of permanent plan, and not sure what that is. So,
well, the methods for the reduction, that's the reason why we bring this to you. We talked a little bit earlier about the number of farms that are 1 to 6 stalls, 6 to 20 stalls, and 20 stalls and larger. So one of the thoughts we had is that maybe there are some technologies, some methodologies for reducing the volume somehow on your farm that is economical for the farm owner. There are methodologies for burning it. There are methodologies for composting it. There are different things that you can do on your farm that maybe be beneficial, that would reduce the volume of the waste product. So if we started with just a few of these farms, I know it's a drop in the bucket, but at this point in time, almost every drop is going to help us at some point in time.
Mike, Scott Swerling in the polo barns had those containers that, you know, you fill them in and then they push with
compactors.
hydraulic.
Right, he's a compactor.
Yeah, did that work? Or
well, yeah, he still has them. Yeah, there's
because that reduces
sure.
the volume.
Right. Well, it reduces the volume, but he still has to have a place to dispose the waste. It still has to go someplace. So what they're doing, like I think Art of Farms is another one that's using the compactors as well. It's going out to the cane fields. I mean, it's a way of moving a lot of waste on a smaller truck, but it's still going out into the fields.
Okay.
So.
Question: have we looked outside? I mean, yeah, I'm sure. Have we looked outside to kind of, you know, other areas across the country that are huge agricultural areas, or even other countries around the world who are even more environmentally conscious than we are, to kind of see what, you know, additional technologies they're using or are coming through the pike that maybe we can consider?
Yeah, we have been looking elsewhere across the country. Like I mentioned earlier, we have looked at the biochar. We've looked at the conversion of waste to energy facilities that are out there. There's a couple of things that work. Again, obviously, the one major component is the volume of waste. The 365 day a year waste delivery stream is very important, and that's where we come back with the quantification here for us here in Palm Beach County. Is you know, if we can get an idea of the volume of waste being generated month to month, I think that would be helpful in trying to bring other types of industries who might have a process that they could employ here to help us dispose of the waste and generate some energy from it. And then I think the other one is is identifying properties where these could actually occur. Obviously, industrial type processes are going to have to go in industrially zoned land areas. They're not going to be welcomed in residential communities or residential areas. So I think we've now kind of gotten over that hurdle of where do we put it, and the answer is it's going to have to go industrially zoned areas. And then I think the next portion of it is how do we get the waste product to those industrial. If they are east of us, that doesn't seem to be a problem in trucking it, but if they happen to go west, like through the Glades area, we may need to deal with the objection of the farm industry about carrying it through the agricultural areas as well.
They're not driving through there already? Like the area you're talking about with the vegetable farmers, do the manure haulers now go past those?
Yes.
Yeah, we go to Florida
They're
Sugar.
going by there.
Yes.
Thank you. Interesting.
Another one of our issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
comments or questions?
What about the transfer station idea?
Thank you. Good. I forgot all about it. How could I forget about it? So another methodology, an interim methodology, but one that could survive the long term, is to continue to look at the agricultural transshipment sites. Now, it's a zoning term that we've come up with that's been in our regulations, and it's been in Palm Beach County for the longest period of time. It simply means that you take a product from the fields, bring it in from a smaller truck, bring it into a facility where it gets washed, repackaged, reboxed, and put on a larger truck and then hauled away. So we've taken that same logic and said, okay, well, that's the same thing we're doing with livestock waste. We're going to take it from a smaller truck. We're going to haul it to a centralized location. We're going to put it into some kind of hopper, and we're going to put it into a larger truck, and we're going to haul it away. So the Village of Wellington, a year or so ago, permitted one site. It was for the GIT operation, which is in our industrially zoned areas here in the village. They've had some minor glitches, but we hope that they're up and running here this year. So, but it is geared for their operation, and their operation is somewhat unique in that they don't actually use the dump truck. They use a garbage truck where they pick it up in their types of bins, dump it into their truck, and then they haul it off. And then when they come to their disposal site, they just simply push it out the back, much like a compactor. And then it gets loaded into a larger 100-yard hauler, and we were told this year that they'll probably be going out into the cane fields with it as well. So that's one process, but it's that's an ag transshipment site. We had also given a temporary permit to another landowner in the south end of Wellington last year, but unfortunately that didn't get off the ground. It did get started, but it didn't get off the ground, and it was a temporary use permit. It lasts for about 6 months. We were really hoping that would get off the ground last year so we could get a good idea as to whether the haulers would use it, number one, and then if we could look at how that operation would actually work and reduce the truck traffic going through the northern portion of Wellington. And we were really hoping that. So we've been told that they'll be back in for that special use permit again this year, and so I'm really hoping that they come back. We really would like to try this out. We also have just received this week a request for a zoning confirmation on another parcel of land within within the village as well. So there's a possibility that we could have at least 2 or maybe 3 of these up and running this year, and I'm hoping we do, because what we heard, and I know that this is a little bit controversial, but one of the haulers actually did do the operation in Loxetchee Groves until he was shut down. But I think what we learned from that, from talking with him, is that he had a significant reduction in his. In fact, he reduced his fleet by 1. He was much more cost effective. He was able to meet all of his deadlines for picking up livestock waste from all the farms that he had contracts with, so he wasn't late in doing that. And that's another thing that comes about as these haulers get really busy. Most of you know your manure bin keeps building up. It doesn't stop. Just because you called the manure hauler doesn't mean that he showed up that very minute or that very day. It's a day later or 2 days later, but it keeps building up. So he was able to keep his trucks moving. He reduced his cost with that by about, I think, said between 20 and 30%, which is significant, and he was much more efficient in his operation. So that was, to me, one of those key moments of saying, okay, look, maybe we don't have the greatest disposal process yet, but getting it to the Solid Waste Authority, which is what many of the haulers started to go to towards the end of last year's season, was working out. But now we've got, as opposed to 10 or 15 dump trucks lining up there, we got 100-yard hauler lined up there. That's much more efficient in the operation.
Is that the math? 10 dump trucks to 1?
If you think about it, I mean, let's say a manure hauler is around 25 cubic yards. Roughly 20, yeah, so thereabouts. So that would actually be only 4, but I think they can compact it a little bit into those. So maybe you get maybe you get 6 or 7, but still a good number, and much more efficient in transporting it to the Solid Waste Authority as well, or even to take it out to for use as a soil amendment in the fields. So And we had a report this year from one of the haulers as well that if we can, continue this kind of activity, he showed that he was not going to the fields, but had reduced his maintenance costs on his fleet by $60,000. So those were significant numbers that we heard. So although I told the haulers this year, we told them in our haulers meeting, if you go and we can get these hauler transshipment sites up and running, those will be approved disposal sites for you. Because we'll know that the transshipment sites are taking it to a location. Wherever that is, we will be able to monitor that, and so we'll give them the opportunity to go to these transshipment sites. So, and they're small enough they can operate, probably within an acre, 2 acres. So they're flexible enough that they could be utilized throughout Palm Beach County. And I think that that's a methodology we could look at as far as quantification goes, and as far as trying to, give a reasonable fee associated with disposal as well. There'll be a tipping fee associated with it for sure.
But what does not require industrial zoning?
No, does not. And that's something else that we've been working with the county on as well, is to say, okay, these sites are simply bringing it in from the field, putting it in in a larger container truck, and then hauling it away. So, we're looking at that as well. One other note, I guess we'll give a shout out to one of the guys who have a compactor that wraps it into 1-ton bales. Not quite sure how that fits into the program yet, but let's assume that we get a processing plant out in Belgrade, and we just talked a little bit earlier about that transport through the ag areas. Well, okay, now it's all baled up in plastic. So it's sitting on the back of a flatbed truck. He can take twice the amount of material. So what a 100-yard hauler, he's now going to take in he can take 2 100-yard haulers and put that on the back of a flatbed. It's all baled up in plastic, and that could be shipped out to...
And who's doing that?
It's another fellow that's come in with an idea of how to process, but he just has this baling operation. I thought it was something we could look at for a farm. I thought maybe a farm operation could use it, but it's. Is
it up and running? Is he doing it
No.
somewhere? No. Okay.
Not here.
Question: when they compact this, what happens to the liquid out of it?
It comes out. It has to be disposed of. Yes, it's a problem.
So where does it come out with the compactors?
When you compact it, you're going to get a lot of moisture out of there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's but again, some of the compacting operations, like the guy with the that wraps them, he was talking about the fact that that the shavings will absorb a lot of that waste. So a number of the shavings will continue to. It's like a sponge; it'll soak up a lot of that as well. But there'll be some discharge. Yes.
Is there fluid discharge from the existing compactors at the farms we know about in Wellington?
I would assume that there's some, but again, you're looking at the sponge kind of activity where that waste product is looking at being absorbed by some of the shavings that are going in with it as well. But no doubt, there is a fluid discharge at some point. Other thoughts, comments?
Is there Glenn, is there a crisis point where there's just not enough capacity, or is this an economic issue where the price to dispose goes up, but there's always a place to dispose?
At the haulers meeting, Mr. Justin Hickey, who is the operator of the third-party entity who is the responsible party for spreading this waste product out on the fields, he's the one that they contract with, the haulers will contract with for disposal out in the ag industry area. He says he has 130,000 acres now available to him to use, all under a permit through FDP. So I would think that at least for the near term, we seem to be in pretty good shape with regards to that. The Solid Waste Authority is, what's their volume? They're 10% of their...
10% of the 300,000.
Yeah, so they have a limitation of what they can take in. on an annual basis, but it's also broken down monthly based on the volume of waste that comes into them. They can take 10% of their total waste volume that they get on a monthly basis. 10% of that can be the livestock waste.
And do you know where they are now?
Sorry.
Atlas still taking stuff?
And Atlas is still taking some, yes.
But Mike, the haulers were complaining that every time they go to the sugarcane fields, they suffer damage on their trucks.
Right.
They don't want to go that far.
Right. So that's why the ag transshipment site will hopefully be of some assistance to that. The Solid Waste Authority reported that they had taken.
I think it's 26.
Why am I not seeing it all of a sudden here? Oh, they had taken 20,400 tons of livestock waste from October of 2017 through August of 2018. So.
And how does that match up to their threshold limit?
It was still less than the 10%.
Okay.
And they're at $15 a ton is a tipping fee. And
Reduce 80,000 and they're taking 20,000.
yeah.
And they're taking it on a year, August to August.
Right.
The gentleman from New Horizons 88 LLC, who was present at the site at our haulers meeting, indicated that they would take somewhere around 20,000 tons annually as well. So again, they're not taking all of it. There's, so that's why we're suggesting to you in this disposal methodology that we come up with different methodologies. Ryan showed you earlier where, we're pushing 200,000 tons of livestock waste annually. So, if the fields are taking, 40 or 50% of it, and we've got a couple of other people taking 20,000 tons here and there, we can see how we can get it disposed of. But there's nobody taking, at least at this point, there's no one taking 200,000 tons annually from Palm Beach County. So.
Do you have specific ways to reduce volumes on site, like on farms specifically, like local composting type techniques that might be tax deductible or something like that to help benefit the farms?
Not so sure about the tax deduction, but composting is obviously one of the, it's been around for as long as mankind's been around. So
Right.
Composting is one of the preferred methodologies for reducing that volume. I've also been exposed to some of the methods where we've used like a tumbling method. Composting takes about 90 days for it to take, complete work through, but you can use some tumblers, like if you can visualize a cement drum, cement truck drum, tumbling in that, they can reduce that volume by about 70% in 30 days. And you get a good organic material out of it as well.
And is that permitted in Wellington?
I don't have one, but if we can,
Composting
yeah,
permit, right?
yeah,
We
right,
have
we,
that.
yeah.
But that's easy?
I don't know if it's easy, but I know
It's not.
there's one.
It's not difficult, but I don't have anything to say, yes, we permitted those, but I don't know why we wouldn't go through the process. And actually would look at it more like from DEP's perspective. I probably would actually look at my friends from FDAX and help us out with that, quite frankly. The University of Florida has developed the bugs. Not sure if you've read or heard about those, but the microorganisms that eat the waste and turn it into a compost, that's been around for a long time as well. They can engineer these bugs to eat almost anything, and livestock waste is one of them. So that process has been out there too for a number of years.
How expensive are some of these things?
I don't
composting, I would assume,
yeah,
would
I
be
don't
somewhat
have
cheap, but
yeah, and there's some other technologies. There's I can't remember the name, Green something out of Vermont, Green Solutions or something out of Vermont. They use a roll off, and they have an auger that goes down the middle of it, and it just turns it inside there. So you dump your waste inside the roll off, and then they have it covered, and I have an auger that goes down and turns the waste every so often. So that's an on-farm operation.
Right.
I don't know what the cost of that is, but again, it's probably not that expensive. Burning it. There are some methodologies out there today that This came from the mad cow disease scenario that they had over in Europe some years ago, but there are some containers that have now been set up during that period of time. They were trying to figure out how to get rid of carcasses in a very rapid methodology, and so they developed some technologies where they could actually burn the carcasses in a very short period of time, and that technology is now available for livestock waste as well. So, and it has less, there's not much air pollution related to that as well, but it could be something that from a farm point of view, you might want to look at that from the cost of benefits and look at the disposal methods for that. Some other disposal methods that are out there, maybe we've talked to some of the haulers. Some of them are getting a little bit creative with these bends. Kind of the GIT scenario is picking up, where some of them are thinking about your curbside pickup, where on a smaller farm you've got the I think it's the 50-gallon container. Where they come in, grab a hold of it, and dump it in and go. Some of them are giving some consideration to doing that to some of the other, smaller farm operations. So, there's different things that are going on out there. But I think, again, trying to look at these different disposal methodologies and look at how we can reduce volume would be another good process. And
Has anybody looked at light technology?
Sorry?
Anyone looked into light technology?
LIGHT?
The LIGHT.
Not heard of it.
Well, there was a company based in Connecticut years ago that had, and it was active with OSHA, and they were in all the automotive plants for and they used light technology to actually clean the water. And then it was used in Lake Michigan for all the bacteria that was brought in from these overseas, particularly Chinese tankers, because all these Chinese tankers were bringing in all sorts of foreign substances into our waters. And they would treat the ballast water with light technology. And I remember this company extremely well, and as I said, it was based in Danbury, Connecticut. And if I could remember the name off the top of my head, but I know that there's also a light technology that I would think has made huge advances since then, and this has got to be 10, 15 years ago, into maybe, at least kind of dealing with the bacterial issue of this.
You're talking ultraviolet light, right?
Well, it was an ultraviolet light, but it was more than just an ultraviolet. It had
Right.
some other properties associated with it.
No, have not heard that one.
Yeah.
That's a new one for me. Thank you.
I think that's the allergy problem.
Yeah.
What do you guys see as the next steps, and kind of who owns the issue, and how can the EPC help?
Well, right now, the next steps that I'm working on with Palm Beach County is to do the quantifications, is to try to figure out how we can quantify this county-wide. I continue to work with the county on the location, but I have come to the realization that the industrially zoned lands are probably where a processing facility is going to have to be located within Palm Beach County. I'd like to hope that we can be successful this year in getting at least one or maybe two of these transfer sites up and running. I really would like to see the benefits of that and how that would help us quantify this waste material, and then also keep it going to legally disposal sites. I would hope that we can continue to work on that. Long term, I think if we can get the quantification completed, then I think that will help us market to some of these technologies that are out there to say, here we are, here's what we've got, here's how the waste stream flows in and out of our systems on an annual basis. So month by month, here's what's happening in the county. It will give us an idea of how we might be able to give them an idea for a good business plan and be able to make money off of it.
That sounds like a well thought through plan. Is there funding for the transfer station?
I would hope that the transfer stations remain in the private sector. That would be my hope.
Mike, if we have,
That would be the haulers doing it?
A hauler or a possible entrepreneur that would do that, and I would hope that, you know, like I said, the idea would be to, if that's the case, you know, then the competitive nature of the marketplace would help keep that tipping fee in line. That's what I'm hoping we continue to do.
Carlos?
Mike,
Terrific.
if we do the wrap, the bale wrap on 1 ton, that can be stored.
Yes.
And then we have an industry that will have
12 months.
inventory the 12 months of the year.
Correct.
They can divide their production, you know. It's like a harvest. You harvest, you put in your receiving beans, and then during the whole year you process.
Yes, that's correct.
So instead of worrying about where are we going to take it right now, can we bale it and have a storage place for it that we can bale it and then have the industry to process it the 12 months of the year?
What is the industry that's going to process it? Because I got to know.
No, we're talking about
right.
getting industries, and then we're telling them that we only have inventory for 4 months. But if we tell an industry, look, we guarantee you 12 months of the year, and if we're going to have 80,000 tons divided by 12 months, you know, we have it in storage. Pam, pam, pam. I'm throwing ideas out
no,
there.
your thought process is fine. My thought is that, as we've told this gentleman who we met with, we need to have a place for this. We can't. He has the methodology for wrapping it and baling it, but it's not something that's going to stay forever. It's an organic product,
forever.
and it's going to decompose. So there needs to be a time limit. So we need an end user that's going to use it, and the end user is not going to be the person who wants to recycle the shavings, because we're contaminating the shavings by doing that. So really the technology that's out there is to convert this to some form of energy or to do something with it. That's the end user that probably will use that product, because they're going to burn it in some way, and his wrappings are also biodegradable. So, you know, this is something that you could almost you could think about it as coming off the truck. Yes, you're right, it gets stored because during the season they've got more than they can burn during any given day, but then it can sit there for 3 or 4 months while they catch up later on. That sounds like a really good user, but it's got to be an end user who is willing to deal with that product wrapped in that particular area.
Can we approach the sugarcane people that are burning to produce energy during the harvest time? Tell them we can pack, you know, store
It's a possibility.
for you to
It's a possibility.
use for burning.
It's a possibility.
And the other thing I heard you talk about earlier was the pelletizing process.
Right.
And if it's pelletized, it doesn't have a shelf life. It can sit there and be smell-free and
Right, but you
easy
have
to
to
store.
you have to have a industry that will do that in 4 months, and then the other 8 months of the year, it's
That's right,
just
but
like
Well,
having
the pellets might
hotel.
last longer than
Right, but the
bales.
pelletizing process, I mean, if they can process, pick a number, they can do 10 tons a day or something, I don't know, whatever the number is that they can process daily. If they just happen to be backlogged by letting the bales sit, so that they can get to them during the, that's
bale, it
fine.
works.
So, you know, that's another technology that would be out there that would be capable of utilizing that particular methodology.
Is there a biofuel or a biochar area or industry company somewhere in the U.S.? So if they bale it and wrap it, they could just haul it somewhere
True.
in the U.S.?
That's another, yeah, I mean, you know, we've had some discussions about, you know, the idea of, you know, this gentleman has come into the marketplace with this idea. He's got a piece of equipment that compacts, wraps, bales it up. Great. Now we need to still find where it's going to go. Do we put it on the back of a train and haul it to wherever this plant is that you just mentioned? You know, who's going to be the end user? That's what I told him. I said, you need to find us an end user, because your idea is great. I like what I see. And it probably measures up and marries up very nicely with a transshipment site. Quite frankly, you think about it, bringing the waste in from the fields, putting in this compactor, baling it up, putting on the bed of a flatbed and hauling it away, or, you know, whatever. But we still have to have a place for it to go. we still have to work that. So I think we're in the process of defining how we can do these things, and quantification is one of them. But I think we're also, as we talk about this, Ryan and I meet with people on a regular basis who have our problem solved for us. But as they look at the problem itself, it's not as simple. I can't tell you how many times we've walked into a meeting and the first question out of their mouth is, where do I go to pick all this stuff up? And I said, well, you can start with the 650 farms. And what do you mean 650 farms? Yeah, you got to go to each individual farm and pick it up. We don't control that. So I think that's what we're up to, right?
Right.
So.
This
Sounds
has
a little
been
more
really
hopeful than
helpful.
it
You
did
guys
here.
have done an amazing amount of work on it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely better than, I
It's-
remember sitting here several years ago saying, oh my God, the sugar fields are gonna shut down and we're gonna be in big trouble. That was like the message several years ago, so it definitely sounds more promising than that.
Well, I think that's we've also learned, the sugarcane fields that were shut down a few years ago with the wet winter we had was an eye-opener as well. The phone was ringing. Where do we go? Where do we go? Solid Waste Authority. That's all we got left. So it really does point to the fact that we need an end user who's going to do something with this waste, produce something, do something with it. Whether it's, pelletizing it or burning it or creating a fertilizer or doing whatever, we need somebody out there that can help us with that, because the Solid Waste Authority has been very clear through all of these discussions. We are not a long-term solution. We hear that at every meeting. They do not want this material. So we still need to work diligently to come up with an end user.
Any other questions or comments?
Is there anything you need from us, Mike and Ryan, that we can do to help?
Give us a solution.
I think we're going to have to start thinking of solutions per farm. If we cannot get a whole solution, we're going to have to start thinking, what can I do in my farm to consume my waste?
That's why we thought we would break down for you the smaller farm operations and even the larger farm operations. I mean, some of those farms that have 100 and 150 horses on them, maybe it makes a lot of sense for them to look at some kind of on-site disposal method. I don't know. I mean, I know that when we did some work when we were up in Marion County, where Ocala is, they're running hundreds of horses on hundreds of acres of land, and I went up to see some of those operations as well, and they actually have wastewater treatment plants on some of those sites. They have actual plants that are doing the waste energy. They're running their farms off of the waste that's being generated by the horses. That's all happening right now. But those are large operations, with hundreds of horses on them, and but they too had problems with the pollution of their well waters and their wastewater. Wastewater was going in. They were picking up nutrient loadings within their water supply, and so that was the main wake-up call for them to start working on this problem.
The small compost machine, I think it was called Green something. Is that? Can we find out more about that? Would that be a solution for the smaller farm owners?
Sure. Yeah. There's been.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely, for my farm, I have the room, so
Okay.
I would definitely, I don't know off the top of my head what my manure expenses are, but, long term.
Turn it into dirt.
I would
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
consider
Yeah. There's
We need the fill.
We've got. I've got a listing of some of them. There's another process. I think it was called the Iron Goat. It's another parallel. It's an idea that the gentleman had about pelletizing. It was a process where you put the waste product in it, and it too compressed, compacted, and then punched out pellets. But it was a small operation. But I mean, some of this stuff is just these guys have ideas. They're just walking in with, I got this great idea. What do you think? Oh, that's a great idea, but where, what,
Does burning create too much of an issue in Wellington? Small farm?
As long as we're not creating an air pollution issue. That would be my concern. You know, burning it hot enough. That's why I mentioned the facilities that we were kind of given some information on with regards to the burning of the carcasses. That's temperatures are extremely hot, so I'm sure we're burning everything that's you know, burnable in it, and you're left with a small amount of ash. So that would be something but I think we'd have to look at that technology. It's out there. Anything else?
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you,
Okay,
Ryan.
all right.
Did you have any other?
Wait, Christie, no, yeah, we're not,
Like new business?
yes, so any other comments on livestock waste?
Did you have anybody? I don't know if you want to.
Any comments from the audience? No, okay, thank you. Yes, let's go on to new business.
I was contacted by email by Marion Grant, who's a local dressage rider, and she stated that I was the only one that she could find information about contacting. And she claims she went to the village website, et cetera, et cetera. And so my question to the board is, one, is there contact information on individually contacting us? And two, if there's not, what do these board members, obviously we want the public to contact us. So can we put on the website something like your email address or something like that so that these people have more access to us? And I wanted the thoughts of the board on that.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I prefer my email address because my phone, I don't always answer weird numbers.
Same.
Yeah, the doctors in the group know that.
Well, they've got our names on the
But they should have our
list of the
email
committees.
addresses,
So
I would think. I mean, at least that
Right.
way you can read it, you can respond to it.
Let me
That would be fair.
find out some information about how we might want to do email for you all. I don't know that you want to give out your personal emails. Maybe we can work something out with a village email and then
Yeah.
it's transferred to
Yeah,
you
something
somehow.
like that. But I think we should be, I mean,
Okay.
she sounded pretty desperate, like she's like, you're the only person who's answered the phone or, you know, I got a hold of. And I just think that,
I know for one that people have gotten hold of my email, and because I've been emailed and I don't respond because I actually do not like my personal email. And I remember asking Ryan, is this normal? And they're like, yes, we have to post your email address. And I've been like trying to find now a way to kind of get around my personal email being given out, because I don't even want for sure not my phone, but even my personal email.
I think the central location thing, like Ryan would be a real good, or, you know, like some place where they say, okay, if you want to get a hold of a board member, send a message here and we'll get a hold of them for you.
That's on the website now.
It is? Okay.
It's on the website.
And it is public information. So when we get your application with the phone number, you should turn in an email that you can use. But I've been told that yes, we have to give that out if somebody asks for it.
People find me, and I'm fine with that.
But if like with what we just heard, you know, obviously contacting a staff member here like Ryan or myself, and then we transfer that information on to you. It's not a problem for us. Tell us how you want to be contacted. That's fine.
And it says on the website, if you want to talk, if you want to
Yes,
speak
I
to any of the
believe- right.
EPC members, contact.
It has my information, but yeah, we can clarify that probably.
Okay.
Okay.
She also emailed me something, and I can't find it, of course, right now. The basic reason for her contacting me was she didn't want the trails around her farm. I guess they were slated to have that crushed concrete stuff put on, and she wanted to
Asphalt?
and she wanted to keep it grass. And I think she spoke to you, and they did keep it grass, but then she said that now she was concerned because there were some other ones that she heard were going to be asphalted, and she didn't want that to happen to, so I don't know if that's something for this meeting, but, oh, here we go. I'm in Boston today. I can't come tonight. They did put asphalt shillings at both entrances. We did this through a petition with our farms in an area to keep it grass. It's only at the dark green trail.
Dark green trail.
he said, Michael Adele at the village says that the Equestrian Preserve approved the asphalt. Is that true? It seems hard to believe. And then she goes on and on, but.
We have brought this to you as a committee. We brought it to you this, we've been doing asphalt millings now for probably about the last 3 to 5 years.
Right.
All the Blue Trail, all through Paddock Park.
It's the heavy use trails, right?
It's the heavy use trails. And so when we did our trail program that we did, I don't know, what was about 4 years ago, we looked at the volumes that we were looking at, and we started to look at them being a proactive program as to where we thought the volumes of trail maintenance was going to be needing. Obviously, the Blue Trail was one of those major ones that we did. The Red Trail was another one that's along the C2 Canal. People coming up from the southern end of Palm Beach Point. All that was heavily utilized. We did that all in millings. We've had nothing but comments and praise for that trail now. The dark green trail was something we piggyback on when they do the canal maintenance. So that program was started this year as well. So the dredging of that canal right away occurred this past summer, and the southern portion, which would be from Gracita Way southward towards 50th Street, was also scheduled to be done in millings between Gracita Way and Indian Mound Road. We took a look at the dredging material that came out of the canals, because obviously we changed the soil types when we dredged materials up, and we were unable to support grass with the original material that was there. So we had our staff go and take a look at it. We thought we can keep the grass on it, so we thought we will try to comply with the request, because our first priority always has been to try to maintain grass on the trails. That's our number one priority. If we can maintain grass, we'll always maintain grass. But for those heavy uses, like at the trail entranceways and some of the heavier uses up around the showgrounds, we just can't keep grass on them any longer. We change them over to the millings. So they'll be, as you can almost imagine, the showgrounds is kind of radiating out with all the trails. There'll be a distance outward from that trail that, we'll be able to say, okay, now from this point we can keep grass on it.
Right, yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do. So our program remains. We have that report that we gave you all, we have a maintenance program that we're being actively pursuing at this point in time. So for the dark green trail, from where she just talked about, from Gracita Way northward to the showgrounds, will be done in asphalt millings. And it's not, and I want to clarify, because she kept saying you're paving, and I said no, we're using asphalt millings.
Right, yeah, that's
so.
what I
And we have a rototiller that we now have invested in to rototill the millings up with. It's much more efficient, and what we've even found now on the Blue Trail is, over the years we keep rototilling it. We're mixing in with the native soils that are there. We're still getting a good firm footing,
right.
But the more we rototill it, it appears as though we're getting even a better footing, because we're still binding the soils a little bit with that material. So it seems to be working very well. One of the things that happens, and one of the things that we get a complaint about, especially around the trailheads, is that during the summer months with the heat, the asphalt will actually bind together or melt. It binds together. So those gets the big chunks, but we found that over the years, by keeping the rototilling going and mixing in that soils, that we minimize that activity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other new business or comments? Okay, we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.